body of Elora Wells, a 27-year-old Two-Spirit trans woman, was found in Toronto's Rosedale Ravine in the summer of 2017. Although community was looking for her, she laid unidentified in a morgue for months. It was the dog walker who found her, who noticed the missing posters and contacted the community, not police. Finally, in December, a DNA test was conducted, and police revealed that Elora had been killed sometime in July.
Elora Wells' body was found outside of her tent. Clearly, she was deceased, and there was trauma to her body, extensive trauma. We were pushing the police of why no one was notified. We pushed 519. You serve trans Two-Spirited people in your homeless drop-in. Why wasn't anyone notified about this body? She was a vibrant trans youth that was, out there trying to make a life of herself, to transition and be part of community. She would access Maggie's Toronto, our drumming group, our many groups. So, there's a lot of factors that really make community really upset, how they would just discard a Two-Spirited trans woman in her life, and we wanted answers, we wanted justice.
Monica Forrester went on to create a support group for Two-Spirit and trans community members in Elora's name, and collaborated with No More Silence on creating this resource for service providers who assist Two-Spirit survivors of violence. Members of Toronto's Indigenous community gave their input on what barriers they encounter and what could be done to improve the quality of care they receive.
Indigenous, trans, Two-Spirit, non-binary, and LGBTQIA people face the highest rates of physical, sexual, emotional, and intimate partner violence. They are also disproportionately affected by hate crimes, physical assault, and murder by strangers.
Dr. Alex Wilson from the Opaskwayak Cree Nation has spent decades researching violence on Two-Spirit people.
One of the first things that happened when European explorers came to North America is that they were really confused by a range of genders that appeared in the Indigenous peoples, especially in the first places where they landed in the Caribbean. And in their fear and confusion, the response was most often violence against people that they did not understand.
Teddy Syret of Bawating First Nation is a Two-Spirit queer trans Indigenous storyteller and advocate working all over Ontario.
Looking at the research that has been done about homophobia and transphobia on Indigenous people, it's very systemic and it is very historic, where you had early Two-Spirited people who were met with initial violence. Sometimes were the first societies that were erased from Indigenous cultures and societies.
The violence continues today, and as in Elora's case, where police failed her, the system and the people working in it often re-traumatize survivors.
Another level of violence that's enacted on the bodies of Two-Spirit and trans Indigenous people happens when they go to seek help from a mainstream or even an Indigenous organization. Is that one, they're not believed often, they're questioned, their behaviors are questioned, their identity is questioned, their gender is questioned.
Not believing their life experiences or their experiences with police or with community, or even the surroundings in which they live and hang out. So these are common threads that and always blaming Two-Spirit people for their own lives, being homeless, underemployed, doing sex work, or just being Two-Spirited, that it's our own fault for the violence that we experience.
Sadly, the people that need help the most often don't get it, and this results far too frequently in the taking of their own lives.
So it's really important that a person is validated in the identity that they present, or the identity that they wish to be or say that they are.
Using a transgender youth's chosen name at work, at school, with friends and at home reduces depression symptoms by 71%, reduces thoughts of suicide by 34%, reduces suicide attempts by 65%.
Any kind of service provider should be aware that they may be the only person that person is coming to or will have contact to, so it's a pivotal and powerful position to be in if someone comes to you and shares that they have experienced violence.
It is important to not misgender someone who comes to seek your services. Don't assume, but rather ask what their pronoun is.
Well, I think best practices for a lot of agencies is actually hiring two-spirited people as staff, so they can not only incorporate better policies, but better programming. If you're having two-spirited people within those agencies accessing those services, have staff that reflect those communities that they're serving. Some of the things that agencies can do to be more proactive when working with two-spirited people is to have sign-up sheets that have female, male, two-spirit, or other. It allows two-spirit people to self-identify the way they want to.
So for somebody who identifies as being gender fluid and two-spirit myself, the one thing I always try to look for is gender-inclusive bathrooms. But if you don't have that experience, and that's the question is okay, then where do I go to the washroom? If I do this, go to this washroom, is it going to be safe?
One of the most effective strategies for supporting trans and two-spirit or gender non-binary people is to suspend your judgment around their bodies, around their actions, around their behaviors, around their lifestyles. It's important to take a harm reduction approach, which means thinking about how practices can cause less harm rather than judging people and regulating every aspect of their lives.
Tragically, two-spirit trans and non-binary Indigenous people are often subjected to homo or transphobia in Indigenous agencies and community spaces. Sometimes when binary concepts of gender have been internalized by traditional people, it can result in community members who don't conform being excluded from ceremony and culture. This may be unintentional, but it still results in the people most in need of traditional healing having the hardest time finding a safe place to do so.
For somebody who identifies as being gender fluid, it's very important for myself and for other folks to find those spaces that are going to be inclusive of our identities, who are going to use pronouns, who are going to allow us to sit wherever we feel like we need to sit on whatever side, and maybe even removing those gendered ways of teaching. It can be very closed off for people who are trying to access those services when they feel like they need to conform to something that they're not, such as wearing skirts or not wearing skirts.
And whether a tradition is new or whether it's happened for generations and generations, if something is harming a community member, then I think we need to really think about how we can make changes to that practice so that it can be life-giving rather than leading to life-taking.
Everybody has a role within creation. It doesn't matter how different you are. We still need each other to have that sense of balance. We still need each other to have our circles and communities stronger together.
Respect and empathy, I think, go a long way. And ultimately, that's what we want, is all of us want to be treated as equal human beings, or as human beings that are special and gifted and loving and deserving of love and deserving of life and joy.